this is my friend Jan, who will take us through the rest of the morning.
So let me start by, before I just tell you a little bit about myself, just to say you're really normal people, and some of the things that you've been discussing and some of the questions that you've been raising, every church that we work with, they're all saying the same thing. So there is a bit of mysticism and a lack of understanding, in a sense, of what evangelism is and what it isn't, and what are the things that holds us back, and what are those things. And you demystified quite a lot of them yourselves this morning. And hopefully we'll carry on from that in this session now, and answer some more of those questions that maybe we haven't quite faced yet, and they'll come out in the process. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name's Jan. I'm obviously a foreigner with a name like Jan. I'm originally from the nation of Cornwall. It's a fantastic country and great place to go for holidays. And Jan is an old Cornish name that was a derivative of a name called Yanto, which is what the court jesters were originally called, and they were the first pastors to the king. And their job was to be a fool for Christ, and they were the ones that started magic tricks to retell the stories of the parables. So the parable of the lost coin became where magic started, and circus skills and juggling and all those things were originally designed to describe the Trinity. All these things are stoked in Christianity, and I find it fascinating that God sort of has had that a little bit in my DNA, and that's kind of a little bit who I am. I like visual aids, I like games, I like playing, I like learning, growing, doing those things. So we're going to do a little bit about that. But let me tell you my story. So my father was in the army, so I was dragged up rather than grown up, dragged around the world, which, although they weren't Christians, probably outside of Christianity the best missionary training I could get, to learn to pack my bags quickly and move to another country and move to another place, learn how to meet and make friends very, very quickly, learn the lie of the land, learn all those things that actually I never got taught as a missionary, but I learned because of my upbringing, which was great. My parents weren't religious in any way, shape or form, and actually, because my dad was away a lot, I was quite a hurting child. At the age of 16, some people started befriending me who were Christians, and cut a long story short, gave me a little booklet. I read the booklet. I thought, I didn't think that this was what Christianity was actually really about. But this is about a relationship with God, and maybe there's something in it. So that night on my bed, I prayed, God, one eye open, one eye closed. If you're really there, show me. Nothing. I was very angry. So I took the pamphlet and I threw it at the pastor 2 days later on a Sunday before the evening service. And he said, why are you so angry? And I said, prayed the prayer in the back of the book. Nothing happened. So he said, did you pray on your own or with somebody? And I went, on my own, of course. And he went, oh, why don't you pray with me? What's the worst thing that could happen? Now see, I'm an intriguing person, so if somebody says, what's the worst thing that could happen? I'm thinking, oh man, what is the worst thing that could happen? I mean, it's just a prayer, and if anything like last time, nothing's going to happen, so I can't think of any reason. So, okay, let's pray. So he prays for me. I fall in this chair, and I have this amazing encounter with God. getting saved in a church before the evening service, being led by the pastor, is the most Christian you can get. You can't get any more Christian than that. And that Sunday evening after the service, I went along to my first experience of a Christian youth group. And there were 4 other people in the room. And these 4 Christian young people looked at me like, aha, that's what a new Christian looks like, kind of thing. Monday morning, the next day, I'm at the bus stop. And I can't help myself. I tell everybody at the bus stop what's happened to me. They can see a difference. I can see that they're itching to ask me. So I put them out of their misery and I tell them on Monday, on Tuesday, on Wednesday, on Thursday, and on Friday, and on Sunday, they all come to church and they all become Christians. Over the weekend, the bus timetable changes and I have to get the bus on the other side of the road now, going a random route to school. And I said on Monday, hey guys, you'll never guess what happened to those people last week. We love a bit of gossip in England, don't we? We love a little... No, tell us. So I told them on Monday, on Tuesday, on Wednesday, on Thursday, and on Friday, and on Sunday, they all came to church, and they all became Christians. Within 1 month, we went from 5 in the Christian youth group to 34. I could not keep my mouth shut. I did not know it was a secret. Till much later. I'll pause the story there and I'll come back to that a little bit later. Billy Graham, probably one of the greatest evangelists ever recorded in history, was studying, and at Bible college his tutor said this, Billy, you're never going to be a great preacher. What was his response to that? His response was this. He went to the tree stumps and he preached 2,000 sermons to the tree stumps while he was at Bible college. And I read that and I realised, despite that story that I've shared with you, actually talking to people about Jesus was not easy. And in the early days, enthusiasm got me there. Is that right? Our first love. You know, we all remember the days when we were really enthusiastic about God, particularly if we remember a date, perhaps less so if we've kind of gone through this longer process. But there's still times in our lives where we remember being more enthusiastic, and that enthusiasm and that encouragement takes us to places, and people see that, and they ask questions, and that's really cool. But I had a problem, and my problem was I believed that I could, in one conversation, in 5 minutes, get somebody from where they were to where I was. And that just doesn't happen, does it? Now we know that, and I know you know that, but we still kind of align with that lie and kind of slightly believe it. So when we have an opportunity, sometimes we get a little bit excited and we kind of just go for it because, oh, finally, somebody is interested. But actually what they said was, that's interesting. And they're very different. And so we fall into that trap and we kind of muck it up. And then I'm looking at what Billy Graham did and I realised, you know what? If he practised, the only way I'm probably going to get good at this is to practice. So how can I practice? So I started to think about ways I could practice without practicing, because, you know, one of the things that always has disturbed me growing up is the dentist practice. I don't want them to practice, I want them to do the job, and the doctors practice, I'd rather... And so when it comes to actually sharing my faith, I don't actually want to practice on people. I kind of want to get it a bit right. I want to listen and learn and grow and do that. So So how can I practice without it being on a person's life, in a sense? And not that that's necessarily wrong, it was just my process, my journey. And so I came up with a game, and I'd like to share my game with you that has changed my life, and now everywhere I go I kind of teach this game as a principle. And I'm not very creative in terms of naming things, so I call it the minute game because it lasts for a minute. I'm good at titles like that. But the game is just essentially this, that every day, and I did this for several months, I don't necessarily do it every day now, I would take a topic that I'm comfortable with talking about. So we all have our shared interests, whether it's gardening, sport, the weather, whatever it is that we're comfortable with, areas that we love talking about, that we're passionate about. And then, in a minute, try and turn the conversation from that to God. Just simply bringing God into the conversation. And so I'm a man, so I would practice in the shower, on the toilet, when I'm driving. Whenever there's a spare minute, you know, I would just kind of do that and just get it into my mindset. And here's some things I learned about this game, and then we're going to play it, okay? Some things I learned were this. Apparently, it takes an average Christian 10 minutes to answer a question. Which might not surprise you. That's an average. So somewhere there's a sermon answer to a question, isn't there? And that means we're probably not really knowing where the person's at. We're talking at them rather than a conversation. You know, I have this conversation with my wife occasionally at night when she says, "Darling, we need to talk." And I often have to ask the question, is this you need to talk and I need to listen, or is this we need to talk? And sort of clarify the ground rules before I get it wrong. And it's like that. So you can't call a conversation unless it's two-way, right? So how do we do that? How do we actually make people feel comfortable? Because if we're getting ourselves to a place of comfortable, if they become comfortable, then we can take them on that journey a little bit further. They'll start to trust us. That bridge gets stronger and we engage in that. So I realised 10 minutes is too long, so how do I get it down? So by playing this game, I play it 2-3 times a day. After 2 weeks, I didn't need to look at my watch anymore. I knew when I was speaking for about a minute, and what that meant was I was answering questions quicker. That really helped. I started to feel comfortable with that. After a month, people could throw random topics at me, and I'd be comfortable talking about anything to Jesus. And after 2 months, I could get in a pulpit and preach a 20-minute sermon almost to the second without looking at my watch. I had trained my body clock about timing and talking to people. And that becomes a really helpful tool because you start to become more relaxed, more you, and you suddenly realise, I don't have to. You ever feel like in conversations you feel like, oh, I've got to get, oh, I need to get this bit across and that, and then it's missed that bit and it's moved on and you think, oh, I had a really good thing to say there and I had a really... But actually, when we relax and we take a little bit of step back and we become more comfortable with where the conversation is going, because now if I have a football conversation with somebody, I know 10 different ways of bringing God into that conversation. So I don't have to worry about it anymore. I don't have to try and force it or make that person feel like a target. Actually, it's just coming out of me now because I'm training myself, I'm teaching myself, I'm learning how to do this. So, for the benefit of the game that we're going to play right now, we're going to use random topics. But when you play this game yourself, I encourage you to start with things that you know and you're comfortable with, right? But for this benefit, we're just going to do some random topics because it's fun if we do that. So I'd like a volunteer or a victim, whichever you'd like to be called. Somebody who would be willing to give this a go. And this is where I'm really if I look down, he won't notice. So obvious. And they're all pointing at you because you're at the front. you kind of felt that probably in the back. Come on then, Phil. Great. So, let's. Can you shout out some random topics for me, and I'll pick one from one of your suggestions.
Italian cooking.
Steve, can you remove the clock from me? So you can't second guess it. Italian food, isn't it?
That's Italian cooking.
Italian cooking, Manchester.
Gardening.
Gardening.
Can still live with that.
Commuting.
Yeah.
Commuting? You like the sound of that? Okay, so here's the rules. Okay, I'm going to say Mark's cassette, go. You're going to talk for about a minute on communion, and you're looking for a way, as you talk, to bring God into that topic. And you stop when you think it's about a minute. So you have to guess when it's about a minute.
Okay.
Okay? Right. On your marks, get set, go.
Commuting is something that I've done for a long time, and I do it virtually every day now. And in the morning, I read my newspaper on the train, and I have a really relaxing time. You know, what's really annoying is when I don't get a seat, which seems to happen more and more these days. I'm trying to think of a way to get on to this. In the evening, what I really like to do is to settle down into the seat, put my head down, and have a nice, relaxing snooze. How do you get got into this conversation? What I ought to do. What I ought to do is to look at the people around me and pray for them and talk to them about Jesus. And this isn't going very well. But it's probably about a minute now up, so I'm going to stop, and I failed.
Let's give Phil some feedback. So, what did he do well? Yeah, he talked about himself. He was very personal. Remember our lists of our encounters? Personal, relationship. That makes a difference. Okay. What else did he do?
He smiled.
He smiled. Yeah. You fake it till you make it. That kind of thing.
But he was humble, you know.
Yeah.
He sort of felt he's humble.
Yeah, humble.
Genuine.
That came across, didn't it? Genuine. Yeah, those things came across.
He was critical of himself,
Okay.
not just kind of thinking I'm the best.
Yeah.
Strange, quite relaxed.
Yeah, seemed quite relaxed. Didn't seem too pushy.
He didn't keep looking down at the floor.
Body language was good. Looking at people. Spoke for 50 seconds. That's pretty good.
It's a long time for me.
What could he have done better? What might be, suggest some ways of maybe how he could have brought God back in a bit more concrete?
Am I going to do this for the rest of my life?
It's a good question. Yeah.
Sometimes I read or sometimes I could read the Bible on the train.
Yeah.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Sometimes I could read, or I could read the Bible on the train.
You could talk about Christian friends who actually do read the Bible and do a study whilst they're on their way into work to make the most of the commuting time.
Yeah.
Next I always ignore them. So.
Those Christians. So already you're generating possibilities. And some of those possibilities might be really good, and some of those might not be. But until you actually explore the idea and working it through and speaking it out, sometimes you don't quite know. There are two styles of communication. One is where you study and you write it all down and you kind of do it word for word. But actually, conversation doesn't work like that. What I'm trying to get away is, I'm trying to get away from a method, and I'm trying to teach you some principles that will help you relax. There's a difference. So it's not a formula, it's a principle of practicing and learning and growing. Okay, somebody else. Let's have a lady, because we've had a male.
Her name's Laurie.
Yeah, I think Tim can go afterwards because he's picked on too. I'm going to go for the lady in the top there.
On the top. We're all
Yeah.
on the top.
Yes. Purple top. Is it purple, blue glasses?
That's you, Rose.
Because I haven't heard much from you. What's your name?
There's a reason for that.
Oh, good.
Rosalind, correct. You got your name right. That's good. Top of the class. So, topic for Rosalind.
Ascension Island.
Schools.
Archaeology.
Cornwall.
History.
Glasses.
Coffee.
Travelling. Travel. Parents.
Have you done any travelling?
I have done a bit.
Okay, let's do travelling then. Okay, so a minute on travelling.
Okay.
Okay, and bring God into the conversation when we can. On your marks, get set, go.
Travelling is something I've been interested in for a long time. I've done a fair amount over my life, but not as much as I wanted to. Been to a few places that I love, and a few places that weren't so great. I spent 6 weeks on Ascension Island the end of last year, working mostly, which was great because it meant that I got other people to pay to do the travelling that I've always wanted to do. And I also spent a year in Latin America in 2011. I was in Argentina for 9 months working with YWAM, which was an interesting experience. I was teaching English very badly because I'm not a teacher. But one of the things that I really enjoyed about it was seeing the passion they had to go out onto the street and to speak to people about God and about the faith they had. Particularly, something I did there but would never be able to do here was to go out and read the Bible. We were reading through Genesis, I think it was, in whatever language we spoke, so I could read the Bible in English and people were stopping to listen. And it was an amazing experience, but something I think I could only do in a foreign country. I'm going to stop.
Okay, let's give her some feedback then. What did she do well? Smiled.
Made it interesting.
Made it interesting. Was interesting. Very interesting. Talked about God.
Made you want to ask questions about
Yeah. I had about 5 running through my brain and then you kept going. And I'm like, stop. Questions. That was great.
She seemed to be at ease.
Seemed to be at ease. Yeah, she faked it very well. When people glance down occasionally, that's usually a good sign of nervousness. What else was good? There was lots of good stuff there. It was a minute and 20 seconds. That was pretty good. No, it's very good. Let me tell you, most people that play this game, first of all, go over 2 minutes. So to get anything under a minute and a half is really good at first attempt.
Can we ask you why a minute you think that's so critical?
I think because what the minute does is most conversations are you just have a few minutes with people, and actually to cover ground quickly in a small conversation builds the bridge quicker. So if you are comfortable in being more relaxed, you might say less, but you'll actually end up saying more in that time because you've learned on those increments. But also then you realise when you get to a minute, you start to realise, okay, this person hasn't said anything for a while, so now I can ask a question. But also in this really good example, we had questions, and often, sometimes, we talk too long and we've covered over too many questions and they've forgotten what those questions are. And actually, God is using you more than you realise. And those questions that pop into people's minds are not just from their intellect, some of them are from God. And so we need to be able to follow the God promptings. And if we go on too long, we miss what the Holy Spirit's doing. We miss what God's up to. And that's really important that we do that.
Is there merit in actually stopping before you get to God in that minute? Because I thought as soon as you stopped and said why wow, most people, that was really, what's why wow?
Yeah.
And then you've broken it, you've opened it. And the same with, I read the Bible, you know, I mean, I suppose that's more directly. But you almost felt you could have split that into two and left the pause in the middle for someone to come in with a question. If you were genuinely going to say, what's why wow?
Yeah. I actually, when I do this myself, I take it to the point of implication without actually saying it. Does that make sense? So I talk about God without actually mentioning his name, very, very deliberately. And because in a former life, before I was a missionary, I trained with the Minister of Defence, and I was an engineer and a scientist. And I worked with a guy who discovered what scientists now call the God spot, which is the little area of your brain behind your temporal lobes. And I don't know if you're familiar with this, but scientists call it the God spot because it's like a little memory stick. It's like a USB stick. It's a part of the brain that has some pre-programmed, formulated questions. But not any questions. Very, very specific, unique set of questions. So questions like, who am I? Is there a God? Why is there suffering in the world? Specific questions that, you know, they're big, big questions. And the thing about that part of the brain is it's triggered by intrigue. So when Jesus answers questions with questions, he actually created intrigue. And that part of the brain would kick in. And if the Bible's really right, which I believe it is, if you seek, you will find. And it seems to me that Jesus has a strategy to help people seek. He doesn't actually give a lot of answers, which infuriates a lot of people, because he comes with questions. But actually, as Christians, we want to make it nice and neat, don't we? We want to answer all these questions. We want to keep it really neat. But Jesus often actually says, well, if you answer my question, I'll answer yours. And they don't answer his, so he doesn't answer theirs. But by doing that, they become intrigued. They start to seek God more. And just like Steve was saying in the earlier session, I want to help people, lots of people, become seekers. The more seekers, the more people will find. So I think it's important to, you know, get that in. So I that shaped how I answer questions and how I do things. So one example, I was in a nightclub doing some evangelism. I used to go into nightclubs a lot to do evangelism, and I had various different techniques. One of my techniques was I used to buy 2 drinks at the bar, and you could tell I'm a bit of a science geek background, but I discovered I'd have a pint of Coke here for me to drink, and then I'd have a gin and tonic, a double gin and tonic here, which I never drank, but I would always buy. And gin glows purpley under the ultraviolet lights, and it looks amazing drink, and it would attract loads of people. So they'd come and they'd say, what's that? Now nobody buys gin particularly very much in a nightclub because it's a depressant, so it makes you feel low, so people tend to not to drink it as much. But it looks amazing. So they come over and I say, oh, try some. So they try some, and because it's a depressant, it would bring them down. And we'd be in a conversation. and the wildness would just come down a little bit and we could have a great conversation. And it was a little technique that I just kind of learned, and I would do it, and I would go. I dated the daughter of the owner of this nightclub, partly so I could get free passes into this nightclub, but you know, I was 21 and this is what I thought was a really good idea. And it was amazing. But then another time I'd watch the people that would go into the toilets, and I knew there were drug sales going on. So I'd go into the toilet when there was a drug sale going on, and people would say, "Hi, do you want some stuff?" And I'd say, "What you got?" I said, "Oh, got a bit of E." I went, "No, that's not that great. I've got something better than that. What else you got?" And they said, "Oh, I've got a bit of weed." I said, "No." I said, "No, I've got something better than that. Come on, what have you got?" And eventually they say, "Well, what have you got?" I said, "I got this stuff. It's amazing. All I have to do is put my hand on your shoulder and say something, and you'll change." "What?" "Yeah. It's called prayer." And they go, start laughing, and I said, "Serious? What's the worst thing that can happen?" And I pray for them, and they, wow, I feel really warm, I feel really peaceful inside. How is that? "Oh, that's this person. I'd love to talk to you about him. Should we meet up for coffee?" And then I meet them up at another time. And the amount of drug dealers that I put out of business in that nightclub was amazing and really great. So all these experiences to me got me into this kind of minute game and becoming more comfortable with kind of sharing my faith. So I want to encourage you to play this game, but play it with areas that you're comfortable with. If you love talking about gardening or whatever it is, your thing that you're passionate about in your time, that's not necessarily God related. Because lots of Christians say they struggle with talking to people, but actually what they really mean is they struggle with bringing God into the conversation. And that's what we're talking about here. So that's the bit that we need to practice. We can all talk to people. Sometimes we have to be a little bit braver. But actually, we're not socially inept. You know, we can talk to people. We can do that. So practicing bringing God into the conversation is really going to help. Okay, another game. I'm just going to tell you about this game because you need to play this in a group setting, but this is a great game to play in your house groups. Actually, let me just go back a stage. You can also play that game that we just played, the minute game, in a group setting as well. In fact, there's a community on a YWAM ship that I taught them this game, and just before they prayed grace at lunchtime, somebody stands up and they shout out a random topic, and each of the staff do this every day on the boat now because they want to get better at talking to their neighbours about God. And so you can do it in your families, in a group setting, but I mainly did it as an individual. Next game.
Can you do an example?
Yes, would you like me to?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so you give me a random topic then.
Football.
Yeah. That's too easy.
Magic tricks.
Magic tricks.
Shopping.
Where?
Children.
Some,
Yeah,
some
children.
What do you say?
Children.
Okay, you're going to make the final decision because you brought it.
Children.
Okay, children. Okay, so have you got a watch on? Can you time me? Okay.
to the second.
Okay, so my name's Jan, and today I have to talk to you about children, which is quite easy for me because I have 4. I don't know if we originally planned of having 4, but we did. I've got 4. They're Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. No, I'm just kidding. They are Joshua, Tiana, Caleb and Sarah. So they're my 4 kids, 2 boys and 2 girls. And the thing about being a parent is everything else in life there's a test for, eh? So you learn to drive, there's a test to say you can do it. You get a job, you need some qualifications, there's a test involved. Even cycling proficiency, there's a little test involved. But being a parent, it seems like any idiot can be a parent. But actually to be a good parent is really hard. And I've looked into some really good role models to help me as a parent. And I discovered that there's a guy who's a really amazing dad. And he's helped me in lots of situations. And I'd love to tell you a little bit more about him. Would you like to meet me for coffee sometime? Stop.
1 minute 80.
1 minute 80. A little bit of slacking. But you get the principle. So I'm just finding a point in my kids' lives and me being a parent to what can I relate to? And actually fathering is a big issue in society and everybody's looking at it and nobody's got any answers. But actually we as Christians have got some answers because we've got God and he's got a lot to say about fathering and it's important. And one of the things, I go to church in St Albans called St Paul's. One of the things that we do blokes, babes and bacon. And it's really great. And we have all the fathers come in with their under fives. And we do it a few times a year. And it's great. And I take my 4-year-old, but sometimes my 4-year-old can't come, so I just go. And my job is I just say to the church, I'm just coming to talk to people about God. That's what I want to do. So I help hand out some bacon rolls and just talk to the dads. And it's really easy because there's not much for dads and kids going on. And it's a great social setting. And we just advertised it everywhere. And we literally got, the first one, 100 dads unchurched with no effort. Incredible. And it's rapidly becoming one of our biggest forms of outreach. So we're now looking at, okay, what's the next step? What do we invite them to next? The process that Steve was going through. So God's got lots to say about this. Okay, so next game is called Who Am I? So you might want to write down this game to remember it, to play it all the time. But it's a role-playing game. And because... have you ever been in one of those situations where you've had a conversation and then afterwards you play it in your mind and you go, oh, I wish I said this, and oh, I wish I'd done that, and I was a really idiot. Why did I say that? I shouldn't have said that. That was not very helpful and it's not very... And here's the thing that I've discovered in conversations is what I think is going on in the conversation isn't necessarily going on in the conversation because I'm so involved in having to think through really quickly, which is why the minute game will help relax you a little bit more, that I'm not really learning. Who's the scientist that says definition of insanity is doing the same experiment and expecting different results? Who's it said that? Was that Einstein, I think? Something like that. So that was the problem with my sharing of my faith. I didn't know what to do differently to change it. So this game really helped me do that. So what it is you have one person in the group who is playing a different character and everybody else is being themselves. And it starts standing up, sitting down, however you like. And I paint a scenario. So for me the scenario will be, we're at a bus stop and we're going into town, we're going shopping. Or we're at the train station, going into town for work. Whatever the scenario is, you pick a scenario. And then I'd shake a person's hand, and by shaking their hand, that means you're in the conversation. So we're going to have a one-on-one, and everybody else in the group is going to observe. And that bit will become apparent in a minute why that's really important. So they're being themselves, and I'm being a stranger. So I might be male, female, Muslim, Hindu, agnostic, young, old, rich, poor. And your job is to work out who I am. So because I'm role-playing, You can't tell from my skin colour, you can't tell any of those things, so you can't assume anything. You can't tell whether I'm male, female, none of those things. So you've really got to ask questions and kind of find out. And the goal of the game is that you are supposed to try and bring God into the conversation with me. So you're just trying to learn how to talk. And some of the characters that I role play when I play this game with our training schools. I will often play a young man who's flirting, both with male or with female. I will play a Muslim, an argumentative Muslim. I'll play, different scenarios from me that have happened. So I'll often reflect on conversations that I've had where I thought, oh, I didn't know what to say in this situation, or I didn't know what to do that, and role play that. And then shake hands after about 5 minutes when you feel like the conversation's starting, and then have a conversation as a group. Okay, what did you see? And here are the results. Every single time the group see exactly what's going on in the conversation, and the person in the conversation misses loads of stuff. They miss the fact that I might have an agenda. They miss the fact I just played this game 3 weeks ago in Spain with one of our training schools there, and this guy completely missed the fact that I was gay and that I was hitting on him. And the rest of the group are falling about laughing because it's so blatantly obvious to them, but he hasn't got a clue because he's so focusing on the conversation that he can't see anything else because he's not learned to relax in the conversation. And so really, really helpful feedback. Do you realise when you get nervous you do this? Do you realise in that conversation you do that? And just feed it back and have a conversation, and what could we do differently in those situations? And just role play it out. Just learn how to do it. It's just a bit of fun, and it takes about 5 minutes. But I encourage house groups to do this fairly regularly, particularly, and what will start to happen, because I've seen this happen a lot, real life scenarios will start coming in. Oh, this happened to me this week. Let me role play this character. And you start to learn and grow with situations that God is putting you in. Are you with me? And so you can actually then, okay. And it becomes more objective, because when I self-analyse myself in that situation, the feedback goes like this. And trust me, I've been on lots of outreaches, and this is the feedback. I've had a really great conversation with this person. It was an hour conversation. I talked to them about God. And when you dig a little bit deeper, this is what you discover. You spoke for an hour. How much did they speak for? One situation, I kid you not, I said, oh, was that guy Roberto? And he went, yeah, I don't know his name. That's quite common. Okay, let me tell you about Roberto. Roberto's Spanish. Doesn't speak any English. How do I know that? Because I asked him a couple of questions and discovered no English. And I grabbed a translator and I had a conversation with him. And yeah, but he was nodding, and yeah, he was being very polite for an hour. That's not uncommon. So what can you really learn from that scenario where you think you're here but actually you're somewhere else? So this game really helps trying to analyse where you're really at, where you're really growing. The bottom line is this: if it's good enough for Billy Graham to practice, it's good enough for us. We need to find ways that we can encourage one another, support one another, and process what it is that we're learning in the conversations. I started with my story. By the end of a month of being a Christian, we were 34. And I was running out of friends. I didn't have that many friends. Some of them were people that I was introduced to. And so I said to my pastor, I had a Saturday job in HMV, and my boss agreed to lend me some equipment. And so I said to my pastor, can I use the church hall on a Saturday night or a Friday night once a month, and I want to set up a disco. And so I set up this disco, and we'd have a disco and I'd play all these records, and then at the end, I just, right at the end, the slow dance, which is where you always finish, and I always say to them, we're just wrapping up now, I'm going to play one final song, but just before we do that, I'd just like you to know there's a bunch of us that we meet on Sunday in church, just across the road. And if you want to come and join us, we'd love to have you. Let me pray that you have a safe journey home. I've only been a Christian 3 months. That's all I know what to do. So I pray. Within 3 months, we go from 34 to 96 people in the youth group. How many of that 34 are still going on with God? Would you guess?
2.
You're close. 5. And there are a few reasons for that. One is we must not let our enthusiasm get the best of us. And sometimes people make decisions that they don't really understand what decision they're making. That's got to be important. But there are some things that these 5 people have in common. One is they all understood the cost and the implication of being a Christian. Okay? Christians often say, it's free. It's not free. Trust me, I'm a missionary. It's cost me everything. It cost me my job, career, any credibility. I didn't have any in the first place, but it would have done if I had. You understand what I'm saying? It's cost me. Nothing I have is mine, right? Everything I have is God's now. God's number one in my life. My car is not my car, it's his car. So if he asked me to give my car to somebody else, well, he's just transferring the loan agreement from one person to another. That's his prerogative. It's not mine. The shirt's not mine. It's his. So it's cost me everything. So those 5 people understood the cost and the implication of what it means to be a Christian. And that's important. You've got to understand the decision we make. Secondly, those 5 people were all actively involved in sharing their faith on a regular basis. None of the others that I could ascertain were. Thirdly, I think the process that I've gone on in learning what it is I need to share, when and how to have conversations with people, really hasn't been natural. I thought it was natural, but actually that was just natural enthusiasm. When it comes down to brass tacks, actually saying something that penetrates somebody's soul is what really matters at the end of the day. And yes, that's about understanding what the Holy Spirit's doing, what God's doing in that, but it's also about what we're doing as individuals, how we're helping people become seekers. So, now, I would say, I'm much better. And in the last 10 years, I have probably led less people to the Lord than the 10 years before that. But the fruit is higher. Does that make sense? People, in the last year, every person I know I have been involved in them meeting Jesus is in church, and I know where they are, every single one of them. And I'd rather have 5 or 6 stick than 30 that don't. And so it isn't about how many, although quantity is important, you know, because I know, you just couple of weeks ago, just before half term, my kids go to Roundwood, so primary school, so they got 2 extra days off before the half term, the Thursday and the Friday, and they were the only school in the town that was doing that. So I figured that's probably true in the country, so I'll take them to Thorpe Park for the day. So we went to Thorpe Park for the day. There was virtually nobody there. It was a fantastic day to take your kids when there's nobody there. You know, because kids can cope with a 5-minute queue, but they can't cope with an hour queue. Do you know what I mean? And so we went on all the rides. And the inevitable thing happened. 4 kids, 1 adult. You're outnumbered. And I had bracelets on them, and I had procedures, and I drilled them. If one of them get lost, this is what you need to do. But inevitably, there was 1 child that got lost. And I was pretty sure, if you'd asked me to write the name on a postcard beforehand, which one it was going to be. Because we know our kids, right? So, and then that thought came to me. Yeah, okay. I could have more quality time with the other 3. Because quality is more important than quantity, right? But actually that's not true, is it? Jesus left the 99 for the 1 with the sheep, is that right? And so actually quantity, multiplication is important. But what is it you're multiplying? And you can, fruit is what you need to multiply, is that right? So when you're doing 1s and 2s and 3s successfully, then you can multiply that. But if you're multiplying something that is 99% failure, that's probably not going to grow as well. So we need to learn, evaluate, process. And I often say this, have a go. Try something. Be inspired. Give something a go. And if it doesn't work, try something else. Evaluate it. Sometimes we have a go at something. I used to go to the All Saints Church down Station Road, and my wife and I were youth leaders there for about 6 years. And we experimented with a detached youth thing. And I said to the church, what we're going to do is we're going to do 10 of these, and then we're going to evaluate. Because we need at least to do 10, about 3 months worth. So we did 10, and we never did any more. They didn't work. And it's okay to say sometimes, give it a go. And the church was like, oh, actually that was a successful experiment, because we didn't plough loads of money in, we ploughed a little bit in, we gave something to go, recognised it didn't work, let's try something else. And I think that's what we need to do personally with our lives. You know, where you're comfortable, keep trying, keep having a go. We don't need another 100 Steve. We don't need another 100 Yans. We need more of everybody. Just where you're at, doing what you need to do. Okay, final thing. I'm hoping you've got a sheet of paper, or you're next to somebody with a sheet of paper. A little small group activity. So what I want you to do is draw a line down the sheet of paper, right down the middle of the sheet of paper you've got. And do this in tables, so only one of you has to do it on your table. So as long as you've got 1 scribe, 1 Ezra, you're okay. So a line down the middle of the table, and then in the right-hand column, what I'd like you to do is write, what is the gospel? In the right-hand column. And then in the left-hand column, I'd like you to write, what is the gospel? And then starting with the left-hand column, what I'd like you to do is, I'd like you to just have a little chat amongst yourselves and write down everything that you think is the message of the gospel. Okay? Don't worry about the language, don't worry about the order, just get it down on paper for now. Okay? And it's going to take about 5 minutes to do this. Okay, so go. we're going to do is we're going to feedback what you're going to say. We're not going to go around the groups, we're just going to randomly throw things out. But it goes on the board if everybody in the room agrees. If there's one person that says, not sure that's actually the gospel message, then it doesn't go on the board. Okay? I'm not going to comment. It's what you think. It's important right now. Okay? So just throw something out. I might ask a question, but I'm not going to comment. Okay? So don't worry about the order. Again, just throw some things out.
Good news of Jesus.
Good things of Jesus.
Good news.
Good news of Jesus. Anybody disagree with that? No? Okay.
Forgiveness. Forgiveness.
Forgiveness? Anyone disagree with that?
Jesus takes the punishment, our punishment.
Jesus takes our punishment. Anybody disagree with that? What do you mean by the word punishment?
The punishment that our sins deserve.
Punishment that our sins deserve. What do you mean by the word sin?
Rebellion against God.
Rebellion against God. So, remind me of the first phrase again.
Jesus takes our punishment.
So, Jesus takes away our rebellion from God. Is that what you're saying?
He stands in our place.
I'm just following your argument.
He was punished
For our rebellion.
in place of us.
Okay, so.
It's a sacrifice.
Well, no, I asked you.
Okay, okay. Objection?
I honestly don't believe that's the gospel.
Okay. Do you want to elaborate?
He doesn't take our punishment. I think the Bible says he takes our sins upon himself and suffers the consequences in my place. But it isn't. That doesn't say that for me.
Okay, punishment implies something different?
Yeah.
Deserved.
Yeah.
Oh, that's an interesting thought.
Yes. It sort of says God's going to punish me because.
Yep.
And Jesus stands in and takes my place, and I don't believe that.
So we'd be better to see the
Not like
sacrifice.
that.
Jesus'
Anyway.
sacrifice.
Jesus sacrificed. No, that's okay. That's the point of kind of us. What I'm trying to do is get you to thrash it out and not just say it, but actually work it through. So there's a suggestion here for Jesus takes the sacrifice. Is that what you're suggesting? Makes the sacrifice.
Yeah, it takes the punishment. So there.
Okay, so Jesus takes sacrifice? Was that the
He is the sacrifice.
He is the sacrifice.
But that means he takes the punishment. That means he takes the punishment. The punishment that we deserve is not to be with God when we die. But I'm not sure that the plan means we still have to bear some of the consequences.
What's important here is when you start working this out, you realise two things as Christians. One, we've got our own language that not only do other people not understand, sometimes we don't understand it ourselves. And secondly, really thinking through what actually is it? What does it actually boil down to? What might be a more generic way of saying what we're trying to say? And that's what I'm trying to get at, because if there's a generic way, then there's agreement.
We said Jesus died, that Jesus died. You could say Jesus died in my place.
Jesus died in my place. Do you all agree with that? Is that part of the message, the story?
But you have to explain what he died for.
That might be a different point. But let's stick with where there's agreement. So Jesus died. Okay. And so what's the other point you want to make?
Jesus rose.
He died for my inability to please God.
He took all our sin upon himself so that we might have a relationship and be reunited with God.
So he died so that I could have a relationship with him.
Yeah.
Well, he died, that's a slightly different point from what you're making. Yours is more process and yours is more the result.
Being right with God is the result.
Yeah. Being right with God is the result, but you're describing the process in which he goes through to make us right with him, which is he takes our place.
We need something in before Jesus died in my place. We need to say.
Yeah, let's not worry about the order, but you are right that there is a point that needs to be in there. Okay, what we're going to do now is pause, stop. Your next column on your right hand side. What I want you to do now is go through the same exercise again, but with two provisos. Number one, try and put the story in order of the story. And number two, think about the language you're using and what it is that you're trying to explain. And boil it down. And if you've got any more than 7 points, you've probably gone too far. Just as a guideline, okay? So, go and do that in the next 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank
Two ways to live is in 6 points.
Don't we have to start with who Jesus is?
No, it's not.
Who Jesus is.
But if you talk to somebody, don't you start?
Excellent. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and do this again, same way. We all need to agree, okay? And we're going to try and go point by point, okay? And what I'm going to try and do is, I'm going to try and do two things. Sometimes 2 or 3 points are actually 1 point, okay? So we're not trying to get a perfect process here. What we are trying to get is some overarching principal points that from then we can unpack further, okay? So what you've got on your paper are unpacked thoughts. So we're going to try and take your unpacked thoughts and put them together and merge them so that in any conversation you understand just 4 or 5 simple points that you can unpack at any point with whoever, wherever they're at on their journey. Does that make sense? So that's the goal. And the reason why we're doing this is this. Most Christians know the gospel, but they don't know how to share it. Because they know it, chapter, verse, this scripture, that scripture, but they don't know how to put it together in a way that is easy for them to remember and easy to share. So that's why we're doing this kind of process, all right? So, what's the first point? What's the first point of the story? Let's throw some things out.
God is king.
God is king, creator. He's sovereign. Keep going.
He had a plan.
He had a plan. Yes, I like it. He had a plan. What's his plan?
That man should live in his kingdom under his rule with his blessing.
Yeah. What else is his plan?
That we should love him.
Yeah. Relationship. He's created us for relationship. What else is his plan?
He loves us.
Yeah. What else is his plan?
That we would look after his world.
Yeah. So God's got a plan. Next point. What's the next point? We mucked up the plan. Okay, let's talk about that a little bit. Let's throw some things out because it helps us with the language.
Well, man wants to be God.
Yes, man wants to be God.
We know better.
We know better. We mucked it up.
We want to be in charge of our own lives.
We want to be in charge of our own lives.
There's wars and violence.
There's wars, there's violence.
We rebel.
We rebel. Yeah.
We've rejected God.
Yeah, we've rejected God. Which is essentially saying we've mucked up. But what might be a better word than mucked up? This is a good word. Something people would disobeyed.
We turned away.
We turned away.
We cut God off.
We cut God off. Yeah. What did that create? When we cut separation.
Broke the relationship.
Broke the relationship. Yeah. So that's it in a nutshell there. So we're broken. We mucked up. We chose to do things our way. We've chosen our way rather than God's way. So we've stuffed up. And that's caused a separation between us and God. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so then what's next?
That was my next point.
What is it?
There's a gap that we can't have a relationship with God because there's a gap.
There's a gap. So we're broken. Okay, so what helps the gap
Jesus.
close? Jesus.
God sent his son.
God sent his son Jesus for a particular reason. God wants to mend the situation. Yeah.
He wants to restore.
He loves us. He wants to restore. What specifically does Jesus do to help mend that relationship? He dies. That's pretty significant, isn't it? Why is his death significant?
Because it's the ultimate sacrifice.
Yeah. Because he didn't do anything wrong. He didn't deserve to die.
He loved us so much.
He did love us so much. He still does. Make sure I get that right. So, we're saying Jesus died, but that doesn't make the way back, does it?
He took the sins of the world upon
He
himself.
took the sins of the world. More than that,
He wanted to heal us by his forgiveness.
yeah, it's more than that.
He's the gateway to the back to the relationship.
He's the gateway, but how does he actually restore it? It's partly through the death and partly through the resurrection. Because if he stays dead, we're not still connected, are we? But in his resurrection, what does that create?
New life.
Yeah, new life. Brand new beginning. There's now a way. Jesus makes a way for us to get back to the Father. So just talking about him dying on the cross is not enough. We have to say he died and he... Two men in history said they would die and they would be raised on the third day. Jesus and Harry Houdini. Only one of them did it. It's important. Nobody in history has ever done that. It's significant. It makes a way. Jesus now has authority because he's been there, done it. Worn the t-shirt. He's died. He's risen. He's gone through the process. He doesn't die to make a way. He says, I am the way. He becomes the way itself in which we actually access God. Do you remember he says, if you see the Father, you see me. If you see me, I'm in the Father, the Father's in me. Many scriptures he uses to describe the fact that he he's actually not just the way, he actually becomes the way itself. He builds the bridge, and that's the death and the resurrection together. Okay? So what's the next point?
If we believe that,
Yeah.
then we can have that relationship with God.
Yeah, if we believe that. What is that you're describing?
Well, it's conversion.
Repentance.
I wouldn't call it repentance, because repentance is the bit that comes afterwards when you turn away and you walk the other way.
Yeah, but I'm going to put all these things together. We're describing something that happens to us as individuals. What do we do?
We submit, we accept.
We submit.
Put our trust in God.
Trust in God. Keep going. Faith. Yeah, all of those things. All of those things require something. What do they require me to do?
To change.
Well, I've heard the message.
Believe.
Believe, which requires me to what?
Decide.
Decide, which is me what? If I'm deciding, what am I doing?
Making a choice.
I'm committing. If I'm committing, what am I doing?
I'm accepting His grace.
Choice. Yes, I'm making a choice. I'm responding. I'm making a choice. Yeah, it's exactly it. It's about choice. So I now have a choice to make. And I have a response to make. Jesus has made a way back to the Father. So now I can choose. Yeah, so I respond. And one thing we've left out. Huh? Repent's part of responding. Because we repent, we make a U-turn. We're still responding to God.
Follow.
Follow.
Accept.
Part of responding. Accepting is part of responding. I'll give you a clue. It was one of those things, one of the reasons why 34, only 5 of them
Proclaim.
are still going on with God. It's not proclaiming.
He said,
It's not
know
telling.
the cost and the implication.
Cost and implication. Parable of the sower. Remember the parable of the sower? The seed. Birds of the air take it, the weeds that choke it. We have to understand the decision that we're making. It's not just about responding, it's actually understanding why we're doing what we were doing. So we respond and understand cost. Let me pray. Father, thank you that you did have a plan for us, that you did recognise that we stuffed up, that we're broken, and you sent Jesus to make the way back to you. And thank you, Father, that we, as Christians, stand as people who have responded to you and get why we've done what we've done. And Father, my prayer would be today that we would not just understand your message, but we would learn to overcome our fear of talking to people. We would become more relaxed, and we would learn how to share a simple message. A simple but clear message. And I pray for my friends here at Christchurch that you would empower them, equip them to experiment, to try, to step out, to try new things in new ways, with a new level of boldness and confidence. In Jesus' name. Amen.
We're basically finished. But could each one of us identify something that we can take away from today that we could do this next week?
I'm going to practice doing the 1 minute thing.
Brilliant.
I'm not going to actually go and do it, I'm going to practice it.
Or certainly think about areas that, that I could do it in.
Fantastic.
Areas.
Yeah.
Where I'm comfortable.
Very good. Very good. I'm going to come along to Coffee Stop tomorrow, and I'm going to invite people to come in here. But I do that every month because I like it and I think it's important. Very good. Thank you so much for coming. I suggest that we make it a point of conversation in our home groups and our men's groups and prayer clubs and family, etc., so that we don't just let it dissipate. But we talk about it, we review it and think like Ian says, let's try something else. And try something, because we do get comfortable with things over there. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.